I think the big thing about comedy is that to laugh, you've got to have some perspective. And I think certain subjects can overwhelm us.
That's the carpet.
If you look at hundreds and hundreds of years, comedy has always been a decent tool for getting a different look at something. There's just a built-in truth to comedy. It's a physical reaction. Your body knows if it's BS or not.
With that, oh my God.
It can be funny and at the same time horrifying and emotional.
Is this real? Is this a goddamn joke? Holy shit.
I'm Adam McKay. We're gonna talk about tackling big, serious issues in comedy. This is Seriously Funny. There's a million different ways you can go at it, but I do think comedy is a great way to talk about difficult subjects, to get people to have a different perspective. For Don't Look Up, that's kind of the biggest subject of them all, because that's the looming climate catastrophe. And how do you talk about that? That's the biggest story in human history. How in God's name do you go at that? And do you do something dramatic? Do you do something with a twist? Do you do something that's funny? And how do you communicate these ideas?
You know how many the world is ending meetings that we've had over the years. Economic collapse, loose nukes.
Drought, famine, plague.
But we wanted something more urgent and more widely devastating.
Will it hit this one house in particular that's right on the coast of New Jersey? It's my ex-wife's house that needed to be hit.
A comet hitting planet Earth. It's actually a very simple idea. It's an idea that will play across different cultures in different countries, and everyone kind of gets it the second they hear it. I think comedy, no matter what kind of comedy you're talking about, is somewhat connected to the world and a moment. When we made Anchorman, we knew it was making fun of how the news had slowly become just entertainment. It was definitely making fun of sexism in the workplace, which is both like ugly and sad, but also on one level hilarious to see grown men act like babies like that. When we wrote Talladega Nights, we were noticing this weird kind of aggressive American pride. So we created this character, Ricky Bobby, who sort of encapsulated that whole thing of if you're not first, you're last. And it was a great thing to kind of riff on and play with. So with each of these movies, there's always a little something we're kind of playing around with. There's kind of a question at the center of it. And then at the same time, Will and I when we did those movies, we just loved to laugh. And when I read Michael Lewis's Big Short, I realized we could do this movie in a way that had a sense of humor, yet had this information in it, yet could have very real emotional scenes. Powers that be like to present it in the most boring of terms, but in fact, it's not boring at all. It's actually fascinating and earth-shattering. We felt like all the esoterica of the CDOs and the CDSs, that actually, when you got down to it, it wasn't really that complicated.
Collateralized debt obligation. It's important to understand because it's what allowed a housing crisis to become a nationwide economic disaster.
I wanted to go after some of these subjects in a way that maybe didn't fit the strict rules of genre the way they always had to in the past. These movies started becoming like a deep dive, almost in a journalistic sense, and we would just quickly break the fourth wall to drop in pieces of information.
These risky mortgages are called subprime. So whenever you hear subprime, think shit.
And what we learned was it's unpredictable, and there's a little bit of an excitement to it, so it's actually kind of entertaining. Audiences are just so much more sophisticated now. They kind of loved it because the old rules had become stale. And then with Vice, one of the things we started playing with is characters dropping into the movie who just cut to the quick.
Tonight we're offering The Enemy Combatant.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
So the menu that you hear read is all the ways that they're gonna pull the threads on the Constitution so they can do whatever they want. And it's delivered in kind of a funny, quick way, but you really do end up getting the entire picture of what Cheney and Bush did to the Constitution. Don't Look Up didn't really call for that, like a narrator or breaking the fourth wall. Certainly there's some information in it and some devices to kind of get across some information, but I think because it was fictional, I had a lot more freedom to kind of just let the story run and be what it's going to be. And then the characters and the actors inhabiting them were so enjoyable. You just kind of let them keep bouncing off each other. I think every character in the movie reflects a different side of how we're all trying to deal with these issues.
Right now, millions of you are having these same doubts and questions about the approaching comet.
I think in the case of Leo, he's the guy who thinks he can work from within the system. You know, if you want to call him the kind of Democrat with a capital D, he's got a little bit of that going on.
Yes, Madam President.
Then you have Kate DiBiase, Jen Lawrence's character, who's much more of a fiery activist. She's gonna tell the truth no matter what.
We're all 100% for sure gonna fucking die!
Is she always like that?
Then you've got Jonah Hill's character who represents the worst of materialism and narcissism. Then you have Rylance, who plays Peter Isherwell. He represents big money.
Madam President, may I have a word with you outside for a moment, please?
You've got to make billions and billions, and the kind of blindness that brings around. We tried to reflect all the different sides and feelings we have. And the good news is when you bounce them off each other, it can get pretty funny.
You do not have clearance for this, sweetheart. Don't trip. Got you some crackers, some waters.
You don't need to throw it on the floor.
It's gonna be 3-4 hours tops.
Climate change is a topic that seems so absurdly large and all-encompassing, but I do think at the end of the day, some of the root fundamentals of storytelling still apply. I think you have to ask yourself the question, what's my audience? Who am I talking to? How do I want to talk to them? How do I want them to respond? And you've got to be really specific about that, because you can make a lot of different versions of movies, documentaries, miniseries, short films dealing with climate change, but you have to know who you're talking to.
Every single man, woman, and child on this planet is going to die.
I don't like him. He makes me sad.
I'm sorry about that.
So for this movie, we just made a decision that we were going to try and talk to the broadest audience possible. We weren't going to make a niche movie for certain groups of people. We were going to try and do the biggest movie we could. And that doesn't mean we compromised it. That doesn't mean we worked any differently. We were mindful of it. And we were going to be funny, and we were going to change gears and change emotions. And we wanted the audience to be surprised. We weren't going to adhere to a traditional kind of story arc that we've all grown very comfortable with.
Oh my gosh.
That exciting feeling of where the hell did that come from is like the best thing you can experience when you're watching a movie or a show. You don't shoot like it's a comedy. You shoot like it's a film and it's very real, and that makes it funnier. It was really Talladega Nights where I started realizing, oh, I want this to look like a legit racing film.
Yep, I'm flying through the air. This is not good.
I'm not saying we 100% succeeded on that, but there's some moments with that racing where it really looks cool. So from then on, whenever I shot stuff, I was like, let's shoot it as well as we possibly can. So we stopped using the looser comedy framing, and I started getting more insert shots. I started using the dolly more. I started over-cranking more. One of my favorite shots is in Step Brothers. They both swing bats at each other. And I think we shot that at 180 frames a second. And it's great because it's kind of artfully done, but it's also hilarious. Then, when I did The Big Short, I realized this is a tricky subject because this is a lot of people on phones. This is a lot of people in offices. And I've really admired Paul Greengrass and Winterbottom, who did 24-Hour Party People. And if you look at those movies, they use a handheld style. It gives like a dramatic language. It gives attention to as simple an action as picking up a phone because there's an unpredictability to the style of the coverage. And then with Vice, our documentary footage and our stock footage, we tried to make it. So there's a lot of shots in there that people think are stock footage that we actually shot. So I think you see some of that with Don't Look Up. I made the choice very early on not to do the docu-style handheld. I kept it a little cleaner, a little bolder. We tended to use slightly wider lenses to let the characters' faces really hit on the screen. I wanted it to have a little pop of color and energy. And if you look at our framing, it's fairly traditional. But when you got into kind of the maelstrom and the chaos of our insane culture processing it, that's when we kind of let it fly. We tend to blend the two, which is kind of the way the world feels now. The world feels like it's like pummeling you with punches while at the same time pretending to be very classically composed. I came into it making an allegory for our inability to act on catastrophic events going on in our livable atmosphere, but what I ended up really learning was that it really all relates to how we've just broken down the way we communicate with each other. I knew that was an element in what was going on, but the more I dug into the film and the more we dug into the film, the more I really saw that that's the core of the problem, is that we are unable to just transmit basic information to each other. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to replicate that feeling that we all get when we encounter the horror show that is social media, the news, emails, texts.
Sometimes we need to just be able to say things to one another. We need to hear things.
I think most people would agree our country hasn't been this divided since probably you got to go back to the 1850s and 60s. Yet still, there are certain comedies that can unify. You can see comedy that would get someone who's a lefty progressive and someone who's a hard right-winger will laugh at certain things.
Look! It's right there!
I can't! My head is in a bag!
So those are some of the ways I attempt to deal with all the crazy issues that are shooting through our collective reality right now. You can see a lot of the things I've talked about in our new movie, Don't Look Up, coming out on Netflix. Meryl Streep, gobsmackingly good improviser. I had no idea. I asked her, like, have you trained in improv? And it's like, you forget, it's Meryl Streep. It's like, why does Superman have heat vision? Well, he's Superman.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the Netflix Film Club channel to get our latest exclusive videos. Plus, hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.